Um, in case you're new to the whole North Carolina scene, this is winter, and what that means is it will be 70 on Thursday. Okay, so just hunker down for a couple days. You'll make it. You get through. You have that one coat in your closet. You get a chance to wear it. Don't be putting it off. Don't be saying I'll get to it. No, this is it. This is your shot. This is the only shot. Now, today I got to tell you, here's today's sermon. Today's sermon is, there it is, Satan's favorite trick. I hate talking about Satan. Just hate it. For one thing, he's the prince and power of the air, so you can count on some technical difficulties if you're talking about Satan. It just happens. It's just understood. The second is this, and I'm just a little transparent with you. I'm really a very modern, technological person. Okay? The idea of a being who is the personification of evil, I'm going, I don't know. I don't think people take me seriously if I talk about this. I'm saying that's on the and I'm not talking about the horns and the tail, none of that stuff, but a being who is out to get you. It just seems fairy tale-ish, right? It does it to but the problem for me is I'm a Bible guy. And the Bible is really clear that there is a Satan and he's real. In 1 Peter it says, I'm just jumping in, I hope you don't mind, just follow along. It says, stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. There is a personal being who is out for your destruction, okay? And depending on how you are on the faith journey, that's his goal is personalized for you. Generally speaking, if you're not a believer, Satan wants to keep you away from Jesus. And including the idea that how can there be a Jesus if you have to believe in a Satan? I mean, he'll do whatever it takes. But let me tell you one of the primary goals he has for you if you are a believer. If you are a believer, Satan wants you to live in a way that pushes people away from Jesus. He wants people to look at you and go, if that's what a Christian looks like, I don't want to be one of those. Okay? And so you're thinking, okay, he's out to get me. And 2 Corinthians 2 says this. By the way, I'm not going to talk about Satan the whole time, just a little bit at the beginning. It says, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. He's scheming, he's trying to outwit you, he's trying to make you mess up. When I say Satan wants you to mess up, what do you think that means? For most of us, if I say that, what are you thinking? He wants us to do really bad stuff. Satan's goal is for you to do really bad things, right? That's what you're thinking. You're thinking he wants me to go off and do all the nasty that I can do. Not necessarily. If we just notice this, I started kind of in the middle of a sentence. Did you notice that? I kind of like this. That little small I means I just sort of pick something and grab. You want to see what comes right before that? Of course you do. Paul's talking to the church at Corinth, and he says, anyone you forgive, I also forgive. And what I have forgiven, if there was anything to forgive, I have forgiven in the sight of Christ for your sake. And he starts the verse, in order that Satan might not outwit us. He's not talking about Satan tricking you into doing really bad things. He's talking about Satan tricking you out of not doing good things. Ooh. See, Satan is probably less interested in getting you to do evil than getting you to avoid doing good. That's his primary function, I think, for most Christians, is he doesn't want you suddenly to renounce the faith and walk away. He just doesn't want you doing the good things that we're expected to do. I mean, James says, remember, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not to do it. And what's the trick? What's his best trick? This is my opinion. I think it's his best trick. And it's something I found in Isaiah chapter 5. I'm just going to give you one verse right in the middle of an incredible chapter. Isaiah chapter 5 is one of the best chapters in the Bible. And Isaiah says, what sorrow for those who say that evil is good and good is evil, that dark is light and light is dark, that bitter is sweet and sweet is bitter. who flip things, who turn things backwards. And this is my belief, Satan's one of his favorite tricks is to give good things a bad name. To make us start talking about something good as if it's something bad. And you say, how in the world could that be possible? That's not it. That can't be true. It's true. It's one of his favorite things. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. But just so you know, we're now going to take a sharp left. Okay? I'm not going to talk about Satan anymore for a long time. I want you to keep this thing, and I want you to remember this, put it in the back of your head. Satan loves to give good things a bad name, and now we're going to go in a completely different direction for a while. Just hang on. Keep seat belts fastened, seat in the upright locked position. Because now, as you're probably expecting, we're going to go to everybody's favorite book, the biblical book of Amos. And some of you are snickering because you know where Amos is, and some of you are snickering because you're going, there's a book of Amos? Really? Seriously? There's a book called Amos? Yeah, there's a book, and its name is Amos, and it's named after a guy who wrote it, and his name is, want to guess? Amos. Yeah, he's in the Minor Prophets, and you don't ever talk about the book of Amos. If you've had a Bible study, you've never studied Amos in your Bible study, almost certainly. But Amos is a really cool book, and like I said, it's one of the Minor Prophets. The last 12 books of the Old Testament are called the Minor Prophets. Amos is one of those. And Amos starts out, this will tie back again after a while, so just hang on, okay? Amos starts out with a list of the nations around Israel and why it is that God's going to zap them. Okay, a lot of the prophets about zapping. I don't know if you may not like the prophets very much. You should read them for one reason. There's a lot of zapping going on. There is so much zapping going on in the prophets. It's worth reading just for the zapping. And he goes around and he starts naming the nations around Israel. It's almost in a circular pattern as he goes to this nation and that nation and says, here are the things you are doing that is wrong, and these things are wrong, and because you're wrong, God is going to judge you for these things. He's not talking to Israelites, not talking to Jews. He's talking to people who are far from God. And he's saying, but God's going to judge you anyway for doing this, and this. And he slowly works his way back in until he gets to the nation of Israel. And in Amos chapter 2, he says this. This is what the Lord says. The people of Israel have sinned again and again, and I will not let them go unpunished. In other words, there is zapping coming. Okay? They sell honorable people for silver and poor people for a pair of sandals. They trample helpless people in the dust and shove the oppressed out of the way. They are treating weak people badly, and God is upset about it. Okay? That's obviously what that says, right? Let's just keep moving through the book. I'm just going to give you just a few passages in the book. In chapter 4, he makes this really, I didn't want to put it up there because it's kind of weird. He makes this picture about rich, lazy women who are just sitting around the house eating bonbons. Okay? And he says this about these women. He says, you mistreat and abuse the poor and needy. Then you say to your husbands, bring us more drinks. Isn't that funny? Bring us some more chocolate and wine, thanks. But you're mistreating and abusing the poor and needy. Then he gets really serious in Isaiah chapter 5. He gets heavy with him. He says, I hate and despise your religious festivals, and your assemblies are a stench to me. Your church makes me nauseous. That's what he's saying. Your church services make me sick. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. You go, well, we don't. No, you know what grain offerings and burnt offerings are? Worship. That is how Old Testament people worshipped, was with the grain offerings and the burnt offerings. And he's saying, I will not accept your worship. Okay? Even though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. Quit singing your worship songs. That's heavy, isn't it? You're having church and you're worshiping and you're praising God in your songs, and God says, I am having nothing to do with it. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but instead of going to church, saying this, instead of going to church, Let justice roll on like a river. Let righteousness like a never failing stream. And in the Bible, almost anytime you see the word justice, what he's talking about is justice for the poor. That is almost universally what it is. Because you don't have to worry about justice for the rich. Right? Do you have to worry about the rich getting justice? Well, not in a positive sense, right? You know, if you can afford the right lawyer, you can get out an awful lot. But the ones who can't get justice, says, and by the way, in case you didn't, that sounds familiar. Let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Martin Luther King Day was Monday, and that's actually he paraphrases that verse, and that's his favorite verse he used a lot. Let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. And then as he's going through it, go back to the book of Amos, he's going through this whole thing. He's talking about, I'm not accepting your worship because of the way you treat the poor. He just said that. I'm not accepting your worship because of the way you treat the poor, the way you do injustice. And then he sort of, toward the end of the book, he says, you people crush those in need and wipe out the poor. Okay? Now, you say, Steve, why did you pick that passage and that book? Is that like the central book in the concept you're getting across? No, it's not. Here's something I need you to get. That theme that God is very unhappy when we disregard the poor. I could have taken, I believe, any of the prophets, any book from Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Had to learn them in school. I believe I could have taken any one of those books and done exactly what I just did with Amos. I just picked Amos. I like the way Amos starts out talking about all the other nations, so you can't say, well, he's only talking to Jews. No, he's not only talking to Jews, he's talking to anybody who's made in the image of God. I could do it with any one of them. I'm pretty sure. I didn't need to try because I just picked one and did it. Okay? And one of the things, I'm going to talk a number of little things today I want you to understand. It's one of my beliefs. I believe the Bible reveals God to us. I think that's it. It does a lot of other things, but the number one thing the Bible does is reveals God to us. And every section of the Bible has a part of God we learn. If you go to the Gospels, you learn something about God in Jesus Christ that you can't learn anywhere else, right? You can't learn that part of Jesus anywhere else in the Bible. Okay? You can't learn the book of Revelation anywhere else in the Bible. You can't learn some of the stuff you learn in the legal parts of the Bible, in the first few books. You can't learn it anywhere else. Well, the Bible reveals God to us, and the prophets, in my opinion, reveal God's heart more than anything else. And I am convinced one of the biggest problems that we have in the church in the Western world is we ignore the prophets, and so we ignore the heart of God. With me? Because what we saw just a second ago is that God cares for the poor, the hurting, and the powerless. That is a big part of what God wants done. God cared so much for the poor, the hurting, and the powerless. How did he send his son? Did Jesus show up in a palace? Or did Jesus show up in a manger with shepherds? And with two parents, I don't know if you know this or not, it says, we just got out of Christmas, so we can still talk about this for just a little bit, a couple more weeks we can talk about Christmas. It says, right after the birth narratives, it says that Jesus' parents took him to the temple and they gave an offering of a turtle dove. And if you go back to the Old Testament and you look at the law, everybody, when a child was born, had to go give an offering for their child. And it says, for most people, give this, I think it was a sheep or a goat. If you're poor, give a turtle dove. So Jesus was born into a poor. When God came, he came for the poor, and he came among the poor. Okay? Psalm 140 says this, I know the Lord secures justice for the poor and upholds the cause of the needy. Now, I just said that if you go into the prophets, this is going to be heavy in case you hadn't figured this out. If you go into the prophets, those books that I named, if you go into the prophetic books, you will find constant references to how God cares for the poor. Did you know that's not just a prophet's thing? You're going to have fun for just a second. This is heavy, but you're going to have fun. Because you can divide the Bible into two big sections. What are the two big sections of the Bible? Old Testament and New Testament, right? There's that one. You can then divide the Old Testament into three sections. You can do it other ways, but most people divide it into three sections. There's the law, and that would be the first 5 books plus all the stuff about establishing the kingdom. That is considered the law. The end of the Old Testament is the prophets, and the middle section is called wisdom. That's Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the wisdom. Those are the 3 main sections. Let me show you something out of all 3 sections. Deuteronomy 15, that's part of the law. I command you, you shall open your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. Open your hand to the poor. The next thing is wisdom. The godly care about the rights of the poor, the wicked don't care at all. The next is the prophets. This is what the Lord says, Jeremiah says. Do what is just and right, rescue from the hand of the oppressor, the one who has been robbed, do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. And by the way, I know you're not, there's some of these things you're not going to like today, but you really need to hear them, okay? You need to hear these. When the Old Testament talks about people who are disadvantaged and poor, it usually talks about 3 categories of people. It talks about the foreigner, the fatherless or the orphan, and the widow. Those are the 3 people who are most disadvantaged in their kingdom, and that's the ones he uses, the Old Testament uses, over and over and over again. Okay? Okay, we've got the Old Testament. That was the 3 sections of the Old Testament. New Testament. Okay? 3 sections again. There's the Gospels and Acts, which is the narrative stuff about Jesus' life in the early church. Okay? Then come the letters of Paul. Paul gets his own section because he wrote a whole bunch of Bible. And there's the letters by everybody else. Okay? Gospels and Acts, Paul's letters, everybody else's letters. Okay? Let's go to the Gospels. Sorry, wrong slide. Sell your possessions. This is Jesus, by the way. It would be in red if you had that. Sell your possessions and give to those in need. This will store up a treasure for you in heaven. Okay? Galatians, Paul's letters. Paul's talking. He's recounting a conversation he had with the religious leaders in Jerusalem. Okay? And he says, they, the religious leaders, the Christian religious leaders, agree that we should go to the Gentiles. They go to the circumcised, the Jews. All they asked was that we continue to remember the poor, the very thing we had been eager to do all along. And how about the letters Paul didn't write? This is James. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Look after orphans and widows. They don't mention foreigners in the New Testament because they were all foreigners. Nobody was a citizen of Rome. Okay? Getting the point? All 6 sections. And here's the thing you need to get. You could ask the question, Steve, how long did it take you to put together those lists? How long did it take you to find a passage out of each of those sections? Was it like, did you spend a week on that? I spent about an hour. And the challenge was not finding verses to share with you. The challenge was picking one from the multitude. The verses are common is not the right word. Okay, I can do a search on any certain word, pull it up, and just go, there's one out of this section of the Bible, here's one out of this section of the Bible, here's one out of this section of the Bible, I could, what I just did, I'm not exaggerating, I could do that all day. I'm not saying I could do it for a while. I mean, I literally could start right now and we could order pizza. Okay, and we could send up our apologies to the children's ministry. And we could stay in here all day long with me citing references from throughout the Bible which say God cares for the poor. Just over and over. And the other piece that you'd see throughout it too is that not only does God care for the poor, God expects His people to reflect that care. God expects us to reflect His care for the poor. Okay? Here's Proverbs 31. I'm just throwing verses at you, just so you know. I don't have all of them. I'm just giving you some of them. And if you know this kind of passage, this kind of topic very well, you'll be able to name 3 or 4 verses you know that I'm not even going to get to. Proverbs 31. Speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. And you'll notice there's a really big deal right there. If you pay close attention, it doesn't just say, and this is so, I get in trouble for all this stuff, but I'm just using the Bible. It doesn't just say, give money to help the poor. It doesn't just say, go and volunteer at a shelter to help the poor. It says, speak up for them. It says to say what needs to be said for their care. It says to speak against injustice, and people don't like that at all. Now, let me make one thing really clear. Because we talk about 2 things. We talk about reaching the lost, the people who are far from God, and teaching them about Jesus. And we talk about helping the least. And the least is just a way of expressing the people that are poor, the ones that are disadvantaged, the widow, the orphaness, and the foreigner. Okay? Now, reaching them, the lost, carefully, doesn't make me a child of God. Okay? You don't get saved by what you do. You don't get saved because you help the poor at a certain level. There's not like if you give so much percentage of your money to helping the poor, so much of your time, so much of your energy, that somehow that makes you a Christian. That's not how that works. You only become a Christian through what Jesus did for you on the cross, and you accept Christ on the cross. But what did we talk about the first week of the year, if you happen to be here? We talked about the fact that we are redeemed by Jesus Christ, we are being transformed by Jesus Christ, and we are adopted into the family of Jesus Christ. And when we help the poor, we are not earning our salvation, we're reflecting the nature that God is developing in us. We are living His values. Does that make sense? And like I said, what I've been doing, I could do all day. Let me give you one of my favorites. I'm not going to do a whole bunch more. I'm just going to give you a couple really good ones, because there's some of them that I just find really awesome, the way it teaches it, because it permeates everything. I was talking that if I were to say what are the most common themes in the Bible, I am 100% certain that one of the top 5 themes in the Bible is care for the poor and the disadvantaged. I'm trying to think of things. I've been trying to work on my head, thinking of things. I mean, I think worship's mentioned more. I don't know of anything else that is. I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't done an in-depth study on this, but here's my favorite, though. Because they're an agricultural people, and they're coming out of Egypt, and they're getting ready to go into the Promised Land. And in both the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Moses tells them how to harvest their fields. This is so cool. I love this. He's just telling them, okay, when you're harvesting, when your crops are grown, and you got a whole bunch of wheat in a field or a whole bunch of barley in a field, and he says this: when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field to gather the gleanings of your harvest. 'Cause that's hard. Think about it. Imagine you're harvesting grain in a field, and you're using an ox to pull the harvesting mechanism thing, right? You ever tried to make an ox take a 90-degree turn? You ever tried to make a lawnmower do a 90-degree turn? Oh, what's the hard part? You got to go in the corner, and you got to go like this, and then you do like this, and you get up against the edge of the fence, and you go like this, and you find to the ditch, and you got to go like this, and you know, some of you've mowed a yard before, right? What's the hard part? The edges. The edges are the hard part. And that's not driving an ox, that's just pushing a lawnmower. Matter of fact, if you got a self-propelled lawnmower, what do you got to do? Turn off the self-propelled part. If you're doing a riding lawnmower, you just go, I'll go back and get that later. Right? That's what he says to do. Don't do that part. Don't do the edges. Don't cut the corners. Just round off the corners. Don't get up close to the edge. Don't get up near the creek bed. And he says the same thing's happening when you're doing grapes, when you're in your vineyard. Now, I've never done vineyard. We didn't do a lot of that in our farm in West Virginia. We harvested. We didn't do vineyards. But he says with your vineyard, do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Okay? When you go through the vineyard, go through once, get it, leave it. And then he says, don't pick up the grapes that have fallen. He also says in the Deuteronomy passage, if you're harvesting your field, and you're taking the sheaves. You've never harvested wheat or barley, right? Anybody harvested wheat or barley? No, me too. But you've seen the pictures. They have the sheaves, these big where they tie them together and they throw that on the back of a cart. And he says, if you're finished, you're doing that, and you look and the wagon's going down a little bit, and you look back and a sheath fell off, or you forgot to throw it. He says, if you see that, leave it. Don't go back for it. Don't go back for a second round of the grapes on your vineyard. Don't go back and pick up the sheaves that fall off. Don't do the corners of the field. Don't do the edges. Why? Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. Do you see that? Make the way you live your life reflect that part of God's nature. Be thoughtful and live your life in such a way that you are helping the people who cannot help themselves. Or in this case, who can help themselves but just need a little hand. Do you see what happens here? This is what's so cool about this passage. If you're willing to work, you can survive. It's kind of cool. Because if you're going to be a lazy bum who sits in his house, this doesn't help you at all. But if you're willing to work, and it's harvest time, all you got to do in Israel, if everybody's living by the way that God wants them to live, reflecting God's nature, all you got to do is go to the big fields and harvest your own stuff. And it's perfectly legal. You can harvest it. You can survive. Do you want to know something? You ever heard of the book of Ruth? Well, you've been around the Bible geeks. The book of Ruth about the woman who comes back from the other country, and she's a foreigner. She's a foreigner. She comes to Israel with her mother-in-law. What does she do to make a living? That. She goes to the field of Boaz and begins to walk along and pick up the grain that got dropped and harvest the edge of the field. That's what she does. And Boaz is a righteous man. And he sees her working. And long story short, spoiler alert, Boaz ends up marrying her, and she becomes David's great-grandmother. Because they're living this. And that applies, I'm going to hit this just a little bit. That applies to this group. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. It's very interesting to me. We talked, where was Jesus born? He was born in a manger with a bunch of shepherds. His parents were poor, and when they went to the temple, they had to give the turtle dove offering. What did they do right after he was born? They moved to Egypt, where they lived as foreigners until it was safe to come back. In Leviticus, it says, do not take advantage of foreigners who live among you in your land. Treat them like native-born Israelites and love them as you love yourself. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God who cares for the hurting and the poor and the disenfranchised and those who don't have the opportunities. And as I said, I can do this all day long. Ready to go back to our first point? Let's go back to our first point. Satan loves to give good things a bad name. It's one of his favorite tricks. Our church, for those of you who are new, has a reputation. We care for the poor. We go out of our way. We sacrifice. We care for those who need to be cared for. We help I could just go for days. And you know what? I get called names. Our church gets called names. People say things, they say we're woke. They say I'm a social justice warrior. They say we're promoting the social gospel. What have they just done? They've taken a good thing and given it a bad name. Okay, right? Are you seeing it? Okay? That is one of Satan's favorite things, is to take something. And no doubt, I'm not denying this. Some people take the good principles to inappropriate places. There are people who take the concept of to care for the poor and they take it to places, and the disenfranchised, they take it to places they shouldn't take it. I'm not denying that at all. That does not impact at all what God says to us who are believers of Jesus Christ. Doesn't impact us at all. Matter of fact, let me go back and look at one word. Here's a big word. Because, okay, we're in all kinds of political crap again this year. And both sides are wrong. Can I just say that up front? Both sides are wrong about a number of things. And what they're going to try to do to you this year is get you to abandon what's right in order to introduce their version of what's wrong. And I'm coming at this from the side of, because I'm pretty sure most of you, not all of you at all, I love our diversity in our church. At least probably a majority of our people lean right when it comes to politics. And if you lean right when it comes to politics, you're going to get told that if you're caring for the poor and the foreigner, you're woke, you're a social justice warrior, you're bad. If you're on the left, they're going to talk about the gospel, and they're going to tell you that if you believe there's only one way to God, that you're a hypocrite and you're judgmental. If you believe that Jesus is the only way to the Father, they're going to tell you you're just intolerant. They're both wrong. Jesus is the only way to the Father, and the Father cares for the poor and the disenfranchised immensely. And you don't get to pick one of those two. You don't get to come up here and say, well, I'm going to do the thing with the poor, but I don't really want to promote the gospel that people only get saved through Jesus Christ. Or I'm only going to promote that people get saved through Jesus Christ, but I'm not going to care about the poor. You don't get to pick those. God wrote a book, and we're not Thomas. You know what Thomas Jefferson did? Thomas Jefferson, in case you didn't know, Thomas Jefferson took the Bible because he didn't like miracles. This was back during that part of where they were trying to get rid of miracles. And he literally took scissors and cut out all the miracles out of the New Testament so he could have his own Bible. And I know you're probably not one to cut out miracles, but there are people who want to cut out the part about Jesus Christ being the way to the Father, and there are people who want to cut out the part about God caring about the poor and expecting us to do the same. And we're not allowed to take scissors to our Bibles. We can't, if you're a tech person like me, you can't cut and paste the Bible. You can't say, I don't like the prophetic books, so we're going to ignore them. That is not your right. God has spoken. And I don't know exactly everything. I have stuff that I'm still trying to figure out in the Bible. It is a very complicated book, and I don't have all the answers. Matter of fact, I don't think I have most of the answers, but I have a couple principles that are absolutely non-negotiably part of the book. And one of those is that Jesus is the way to heaven. There is no other name given under heaven by which you must be saved than Jesus Christ. And there is no way you can live for Jesus the way Jesus wants you to without caring for those who need your care. Okay? Got a little excited there. C.S. Lewis said this, and he had to have said it before 1963, so he had no knowledge of what's going on in our world. He died in 1963, so he had to say it before that. He said, the descent to hell is easy, and those who begin by worshiping power soon worship evil. And we have to watch ourselves that we worship the one true God, we serve Him alone, and we honor His word. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who also definitely said it before 1960, he died in the 40s, says the church is the church only when it exists for others. The church must share in the secular problems of ordinary human life, not dominating, but helping and serving. Okay, how do you do this? How do you do this? Let's go practical for a second. Find ways to help the poor locally, around the world. Find ways. We live in this incredibly connected universe where we can do this, okay? Locally. One of the things I do, our church does, 5 and 2 food pantry. It's not our ministry. We don't own it. We don't own the buildings. We have some people on the board, but they do a great job. I encourage you, just do 5 and 2 food pantry. Start giving on a regular basis. My wife and I have a certain amount of money that goes to 5 and 2 food pantry every month. I encourage you to do that. It's easy way to help the poor. You say, Steve, I don't really. Our finances are so tight. I don't think we can do that right now. Tim, would it be okay if people volunteer at 5 and 2 food pantry? If they just show up and contact you, can they come and volunteer? They can actually hand out food and stuff, right? Go do it. Okay? So what about people around the world? I'm just suggesting. Okay, I'm giving you things that I do, and just find your stuff. There is a place. Hope this works. Nope. Got to turn it on first. It's Kiva, Kiva.org. And Kiva does microloans. They're not associated with us in any way or any group that I'm associated with. Microloans. They go to 2/3 of the world's countries. They identify people who are trying to do better, trying to improve their lives. And they give them microloans. I'm talking $500, maybe $1,000. And my wife and I give $30 a month. And what Kiva does, you can actually go to Kiva and pick out which people you want to get the money. They'll have a list of this. This woman she makes T-shirts and she sells them to tourists. Isn't that kind of cool? You can give her the money to buy the T-shirts that she can then do her artwork on and then sell to the tourists. This guy has a little bit of a farm, and if he had 5 more goats, he could sell the milk and put his kids in school. Take my money. Here's the part, it's a loan. They're expected to pay it back. And they do. I got like 3 reports this week of people who've paid off the loan that we made to them a year or 2 ago. And of course, my wife and I, we're just letting it ride. Okay, if somebody pays it off, it goes back in the pool, they reloan it out. You can pick, we don't ever pick, we just let them handle it. They pick the people, the money goes out, it comes back in, it gets recirculated. We currently, and this is not brag, it's $30 a month. We have thousands of dollars that are currently circulating around the world, in Uganda, in the Dominican Republic, you name the place where there are lots of people who are hurting, and we've got a few dollars there helping somebody get ahead. And I'm not saying this is the best thing, it's just what I do. Find the thing you can do. But don't stop there. Remember what it said in Proverbs? It said, speak up. And here's where we came in. First week we talked about who you are. You're adopted, so you live as an adopted child of God. The second week, last week, Aaron talked about being winsome, doing it politely, speaking well, but speak well for the people who need you to speak for them. Vote well, vote for the people who will help those who need helping. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I'm not going to, just keep that, like when you harvest your grain, don't cut the corners. Just make it part of your thought process. Make it part of how you make decisions everywhere. When you're at a restaurant and you can tell the waitress has had a rough run of it, and you're financially able to do it, take the tip up a notch. Develop generosity toward those who need it. That makes sense? Okay? And you're reflecting your Father in heaven. You're reflecting His nature. Okay? This is a heavy week. You come out in the cold and I do this to you. I apologize. No, I don't. Couple more quick things. One, I said, make sure you give to things outside the church. Give to things inside the church too. Like we've got a trip to Cambodia. We got planned coming up in just a few months, and we go to Cambodia and we help the kids who live on the streets by being out on the streets with the kids. I've told you this before. When I went over there the very first trip, and every day we go out and work. When we worked out in the I don't know what you call. They're just open grass. It's not a park by anything you would call a park here. It's just a place. There's nothing else except grass. And every day there would be at least one or two little 2, 3, 4-year-old kids naked because it was laundry day and they only had one outfit. That's who we help in Cambodia. So you can give to the church too. And you can serve at the church too. I mean, sure, like Barry's talking about greeting, that doesn't necessarily directly help the poor, but as we develop this community, which we have to develop all the time because Uncle Sam keeps taking our people and moving them other places, we have to continually develop and continually train new people, and we constantly need more people to help with what we do here, okay? So just, you can do it on your app. Say, I want to sign up and help. If you want to come, we've got a next step luncheon, I think he mentioned earlier. We'll talk about some of the things. Our church is almost 18 years old, and God has done some insane things through us. And He's going to continue, and I want you to be part of it. Okay? So, is that heavy enough for you? All right, let's pray. Father, thank you that you don't give us easy. Thank you that you challenge us. Thank you that your word is clear. Father, if there were just 1 or 2 verses that talked about the need to help the poor and the disadvantaged, that would be one thing. But when it is one of the most common themes in the Bible, for me to ignore that theme is for me to ignore your word. Help me personally to do better. Help me to be more hands-on. Show me other ways that I can help. Father, help us as a community, as a church community, to continue to do things that are significant. Father, things that matter for the people around us and the people around the world. And get glory from our community. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.